Which protein sources are the greatest and which are the worst? It's not as easy as getting your proteins and fats when you're on a ketogenic diet, to be honest. If you truly want to take care of your body, you have to go one step further and understand where your protein sources come from, as well as what they're doing inside your body that you might not even be aware of. So let's get right to it. I'll list the 3 proteins I believe you should prioritize first, followed by the 3 proteins I believe you should completely avoid, or at the very least try to limit your intake of, starting with salmon. Okay, so that one should be quite apparent. Given that salmon has a greater fat content and makes sense on a ketogenic diet, you would have thought Health Angel Solutions would be discussing it. But I want to go a little bit further than that. You've certainly heard this story before, but it mostly involves what are known as PCBs. Let me start by explaining why you want to be sure you're receiving wild-cut and not farmed. PCB stands for polychlorinated biphenyls, okay? And what these PCBs do is they cause a lot of chaos with your autoimmune system within your body. What that means is that whenever you consume these PCBs, it's triggering your immune system to actually start this cascade of different white blood cells and different immune responses that cause your body to fatigue. You may not feel it right in the front end, but you're going to feel it when it comes down to burning fat, having more energy, things like that. Because your body is wasting resources on triggering up the immune system than the resources it should be using to help you burn some fat, get in better shape, and feel great. So what we're finding, particularly in a study, those published in the journal Science, is that salmon samples that were wild cod ended up not having too much in the way of PCBs, still a little bit, because they were able to be consumed through whatever that fish was eating, and through the ocean, etc. But salmon that was farm-raised ended up having 8 times as much in the way of PCBs. Okay, so we know farm-raised, bad, wild-caught good. But let's talk about one other thing, the omega-3, omega-6 profile. And again, if you're a subscriber of mine, you know I talk about this all the time, but let me lay something out a little bit different. It's not the omega-3s we're focused on with the salmon. I honestly don't even care too much about that. I'm focusing more so on how much in the way of omega-6 there is. See, the omega-6 is what we want to be watching. We do not wish to consume excessive amounts of it. Omega-6 is what's going to cause another inflammatory response within the body. It's also going to make you feel very foggy, and it's a very bad fat to run on when you're on a ketogenic diet. So what they've been finding is that when you take just a half a fillet of wild-caught salmon, you have approximately 340 milligrams of omega-6. But when you take that same half a fillet of salmon from a farm-raised source, there's almost 2,000 milligrams of omega-6. We're not talking a small, negligible difference here. We're talking a huge difference that can make you feel like absolute garbage. So we don't want the omega-6, as we do want the omega-3s. Now, the omega-3s have been shown in other studies to activate something that is known as mechanistic target of rapamycin. What the heck is that? Well, in short, it's called mTOR, and it's our body's anabolic system. It's what triggers our body to store muscle or to build muscle. And there was a study that was published in the Journal of Clinical Science that found that omega-3 consumption ended up increasing imports, igniting by 50%, and ultimately ended up increasing protein synthesis by 50%. What does that mean to you as someone who follows a ketogenic lifestyle? It means that the protein you're going to eat is actually synthesized into muscle rather than going through the gluconeogenesis pathway and getting converted into sugar and kicking you out of ketosis. So it's very important that you get the right amount of omega-3. All right, sockeye salmon is higher fat, so we want to go for the leaner salmon. However, don't forget that too much fat causes toxins. All right, avoid making extremely high fat cuts unless you are certain of the source. All right, so choosing leaner meat cuts helps us manage the amount of fat we put into our bodies. To elaborate, if you eat a leaner cut of meat, you're not depending on the fat from the meat, because doing so could lead to you becoming dependent on the toxins and omega-3 profiles in the meat or whatever the animal consumed in the past. However, In contrast to what all the keto people will tell you, you can add your avocado or coconut oil to your meal. You can control the fats while still getting good, high-quality protein by adding macadamia nuts. But when it comes to beef, I've done videos on this before. You need to make sure you're getting grass-finished beef, not just grass-fed beef. This means that the omega-3 profile is good and solid. So again, when you choose the lower fat cuts of meat, you're getting the higher quality fats. However, this rule applies to everything. For example, when it comes to chicken or fish, always try to choose a leaner cut because you can control the fats much better. Now let's talk about another protein source that isn't actually meat. In this case, I want to talk about Bulgarian yogurt because it uses a much more diverse bacterial profile than Greek yogurt. I don't understand why Bulgarian yogurt hasn't become more popular. You're essentially just looking at Thermophilus and a small amount of Bulgarian yogurt. Okay, not a lot of different bacteria, but when you look at Bulgarian yogurt, you'll notice that it has bifidum added in there as well. And there are a lot of different strains of bifida. So when you look at Bulgarian yogurt, you're getting such a diverse profile of bacteria, which can be much healthier on your gut and help digestion, help your immune system, and help your brain. However, Bulgarian yogurt differs from Greek yogurt in that it's strained. In fact, it's strained 3, 4, sometimes even 5 times to get that thick consistency, so it tastes great, but it lacks many of the fun things we really need, like Bulgarian yogurt. I have nothing against Greek yogurt. I simply believe that Bulgarian yogurt is slightly higher in protein and will provide you with slightly more fat if you opt for a higher fat variety. Furthermore, it is extremely low in carbohydrates and much lower than Greek yogurt. So if you avoid dairy, I strongly advise you to try coconut yogurt. Okay, that was a mouthful, but I have to tell you what to avoid. I like to start this video with the positive, so let's move on to the more negative aspects. The first thing I want you to be particularly cautious of is whey protein concentrate. When you look at whey proteins, you'll find that there are 2 different types of whey protein. Whey protein isolate and whey protein concentrate. One is simply a more isolated form of whey protein, but the other still contains milk solids and other ingredients. I would like to discuss whey protein concentrate, but I also want to discuss whey in general because it is very insulin-genic, which means that when you're on a ketogenic diet, the goal is to get your insulin levels really low so that your blood sugar levels are nice and stable. You don't want these insulin spikes because whey protein has been shown to be highly insulin-genic. This means that if you regularly consume whey protein shakes, your insulin levels will be downregulated, which will prevent you from having control over your insulin. Additionally, postprandial aminos, glucose-dependent peptides, and glucagon-like peptide ZAR have been found to be elevated after whey protein consumption to a greater degree than after white bread consumption. For those of you who may not understand what that means. So, if you're wondering why you have such large energy swings on a ketogenic diet, just relax on the whey protein the next thing. Yes, whey protein spikes more insulin than white bread, which will kick you out of ketosis and make your life kind of miserable. Tilapia now. By now, again, you know that tilapia is probably not the highest quality fish. You've probably seen some things out there in the internet. But what's really interesting is that Johns Hopkins Center actually did some research and found that tilapia, generally speaking, is fed pig feces and chicken feces. Yeah, do I need to say any more? Okay, so what's literally happening is tilapia's metabolism is so unique that it needs very little nutrition, which of course shines through. And when you eat it, you're not getting much nutrition, but that tilapia is eating literally feces, and it's extracting small amount of the nutrients out of that feces so that it can grow. But it doesn't grow a whole lot off at just species. So they have to add one more thing, methyl testosterone, which sounds just like it is. Okay, methyl testosterone, they take testosterone, they add some methyl groups, and they swap them around in different chains, and they give you methyl testosterone, which basically is a steroid to make the tilapia grow. Well, what happens when we consume that? It affects our liver. In fact, it's outlawed in most countries. but for some reason, the United States still allows methyl testosterone to be used in tilapia. In short, it's artificial fish, okay? It flat out. It's artificial fish. It's basically the candy bar of the fish world. So just forget it. Okay, now, lastly, this one again might be obvious, but I need to address it because I know way too many people on the ketogenic diet that do this. Cut out the cold cuts. Okay, they don't need to be there. So many people on keto will tell you, oh, I just take some string cheese and I wrap it in some salami. ORS, take some string cheese and I wrap it in my, You know, cold cut, pastrami, guys, it has been proven so many times now that different forms of cold cuts are linked to colorectal cancer. In fact, the American Institute of Cancer Research published a study just a couple of years ago that found that if you consume 3.5 ounces, a small amount of deli meat daily, you have a 36% increase in your risk of colorectal cancer. Now, all cancer aside, because I know that's kind of deferred, we don't always think of cancer in the forefront. We often consider it later, but we don't always put it into practice in our daily lives. That being said, if it's causing something to happen to our DNA or RNA, it could be causing a problem where our body isn't properly synthesizing protein or using nutrients. The fact is, don't be a cheapskate, okay? Get the right stuff, get the high-quality stuff, and as always, make sure you're keeping it locked in here on my videos so you can figure out what works for you. Also, make sure to take advantage of the ButcherBox offer that's listed in the description below. It's actually less expensive than the grocery store, so you should check it out. I'll see you in the next video.